The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society.
Let us never tolerate outrageous conspiracy theories. Conspiracy theories. Conspiracy theories.
For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy.
Because it is not the government of the people any longer. Most people do not understand the Illuminati.
A new world order. A world where the rule of law governs the conduct of nations.
Conspiracy theories.
It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations.
A new world order.
Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised.
It's the Weekend Vigilante Show.
Hello, listeners, and welcome to the Weekend Vigilante Show. I'm your host, Sheila Zilinsky, joined by my co-host, the one, the only, the thorn in Al Gore's side, renowned climatologist and defender of our freedoms, Dr. Tim Ball. We have a huge treat for our listeners. As you all know him, the award-winning American journalist and television reporter who left Fox 19 News to start his own operation. Such a great man of liberty, Ben Swann. Welcome to the program.
Thanks so much for having me on.
It's a pleasure. So listen, Ben, you're really the model of the cutting edge of new media. You've won many awards. You've launched your own operation. You're a well-respected man and a great defender of our liberty. So let's just jump into this. You've got this present administration working in collusion with these government agencies now going with a vengeance after leakers, media sources, anyone and everyone suspected of betrayal. That's what they're calling it now. Can you imagine, Ben, anyone telling the truth about Benghazi, the IRS, talking about Al-Qaeda? I mean, practically anything now is betrayal. You name the issue, it's betrayal. On the political dissent list you go, this is censorship under the color of the authority of anyone in the U.S. who's attempting to expose what's going on. And it really is about controlling damning information. It's damage control to the extreme and pure censorship. Weigh in on that, Ben.
Yeah, it certainly is unprecedented. I mean, what we're seeing today in the United States, when President Obama became president, he had promised transparency to a new level, certainly using the Internet to create more transparency than other administrations had been known for. And, of course, that's turned out to be the exact opposite. I mean, more Americans have been pursued as whistleblowers under this president and tried as whistleblowers under this president than all other U.S. presidents combined. It's a pretty stunning thing when you consider the fact that they have really cracked down on anyone they see as a dissenter. We had an article up at benswan.com, CNN anchor Carol Costello talking about the fact that this administration, she says, will threaten your job if you criticize them in any way. They don't like criticism. They don't like anyone who they see as a dissenter. And as you said, they see it as a betrayal. And they're very quick to crack down on anyone who is seen as a dissenter.
Well, hold on, Tim. I mean, Ben, you've got this. I mean, essentially then, if I have it correctly, I mean, really, Obama's war in the media is quite frightening, to say the least. But you see the NSA, the DHS, this intimidation and this virulent crackdown, as you just alluded to, anyone that doesn't like the current, policies or whatever the administration. It seems anyone that is even remotely critical of this administration or its policies, whether it's a journalist or the new media, it seems this cabal of collectivists appears to want to turn America into an old Soviet Union. Is that correct?
Well, I would say it's incorrect in that I don't think they want to turn it into the old Soviet Union. I think they want to turn it into what the Soviet Union had dreamed that they would one day be, but were unable to be because of the lack of technology. I think what America is right now was everything the Soviets had dreamed of. They just didn't have the ability to be them. And that is, not meant to be a slam against any one party. I think too often we fall into that left-right paradigm of thinking that, this administration, it's the Democrats who are doing this to us. But the reality is both parties at the very top level push for the same things. They create the same crackdowns on freedom of speech, freedom of press. It's endemic of those who are in power and statists who believe that government ultimately is the answer to everything, and that dissenters are truly dangerous.
Very good point. Dr. Ball, go ahead.
It seems that, I've forgotten who said it, but government will grow and gradually take over, and that's almost a natural process. And, of course, that's what the Founding Fathers were fighting against. But it seems that we're now at a point where 70 years on from the war, and during the war, and I was living in England during the war, and I know that my mother was given coupons by the government and given a choice of one or two coats that she could buy, as long as she had enough coupons, where the people surrendered their individual freedoms completely to the government to win the war. So there was a cause. But then since the war, governments have been very loath to give back that what they were given, and we now have whole generations, in fact, 5 or 6 generations, who simply can't imagine that there could be less government. And is that a huge challenge to trying to point out to people what's going on?
Yeah, it absolutely is. Look, I think you're making a very good point here, which is that we live at a time in America, certainly where, really for the last 100 years, we've been in a process of significantly growing government, whether it's on a local level, on a state level, or on a national level. And I agree with you. I think that we have multiple generations of Americans now who believe that, much like Keynesian economic theory, that the market must always continue to grow, so too government always continues to grow. And they also seem to believe that money is somehow this device that perpetually loses value. That inflation is just a natural occurring thing. So you have this very strange kind of view, and I think that's the product of media. I think it's the product of public education that doesn't allow a lot of these ideas to be challenged. And no, I would agree with you that I think we're in a very strange time when people don't seem to believe that in the idea that government can be restricted, can be scaled back, and that, again, is on multiple levels. I would submit that the place we're seeing the most growth, where it really encroaches on the most liberty, is not even on the federal level. It's happening on the local level. It's happening in city councils and county commissions across the country.
Well, Ben, you're a smart guy, and you've really got your thumb in the pulse. I mean, the left-right paradigm you talk, that's fallen apart so much. And as you always say, it's not a left versus right. It's a liberty versus tyranny issue. And this bought and paid for controlled mainstream media has really tempered things, but they have also been forced to cover things because of this new media, alternative media, like yourself. And in the fact that we're seeing through this facade, what happened with Syria, sites like you, so much you're not being told. They never talk about Al-Qaeda in Iraq, and, it's a real testament we did not overtly go to war with Syria, but do you think that the lying and the outrageous, it's teetering on the brink of absurdity, the lying this administration's doing? You take Obamacare, and this largest tax increase in the entire history of America, and this overreach in government history is you just mentioned earlier, wrong, truth and lies, where's the accountability? It seems like the emperor is buck naked here. Do you think that you just total ramp up of this totalitarianism? Do you think that there's going to be some pushback now? You're seeing some very frightening legislation as far as censorship, controlling internet, et cetera, and the CISPA and the SOPAs and the net neutrality. What do you weigh in on all that?
Well, I think that's where the real battle is headed. The battle is headed to the internet because, as you're pointing out, we have this really remarkable time in world history and human history where there is this collision between information and technology, and the ability for the individual to be empowered with information really like no other time, as I said, in human history. You can really compare the advent now of the internet to the Gutenberg press and the ability that civilizations had to leap forward because of access to printed material. Well, it's a similar type of thing now. So, obviously if you're in power and you want to restrict that, so that happens on a couple levels. CISPA is a huge part of that. You mentioned CISPA a minute ago. That is an internet bill for your listeners who might not be familiar with it, essentially to protect intellectual property rights. But it doesn't protect intellectual property rights. We already have trademark law that does exactly that. You can go to court over those issues. Instead, what CISPA does is it allows a company to essentially claim copyright infringement, intellectual property infringement, and then DHS goes in and shuts down the entire website that is the infringing website. It doesn't just pull the material.
Yes.
And that's very important because, if you have someone who happens to put material on a website on one page and DHS decides they're going to shut down the entire site, seize all the servers, they absolutely can do it. So, it's a way of going around the judicial system, which is the process by which Americans have been protected in the past from, in some ways, government overreach. Obviously, in many ways, the courts have facilitated government overreach, but it's supposed to be part of that check and balance system, and it would go away with CISPA. And then the other issue, net neutrality, if I can just mention a little bit about this. This is a very important issue because it's kind of flown under the radar. Net neutrality, for folks who don't know, is a law that's in place right now that Congress has passed in order to say that if you have an internet provider, an AT&T or a Comcast or a company like that, they must provide equal accessibility to the internet for companies. So, for instance, if my website, which we're online and we have servers and we have hosting, what AT&T or Comcast can't do is say, you know what, we don't like Swann.com. So instead, we're going to make it really, really difficult for people to get on there by slowing down the ability of people to load your page, by making it difficult to find in search engines. We're going to block people from being able to really access it unless, Ben Swann wants to pay us and give us more money, and then we'll make it easy for people to access. Now, right now, under law, it's illegal for that to happen. But if net neutrality goes away, and right now a D.C. Circuit Court is hearing a case about this, they are one, court removed from this U.S. Supreme Court, and the indications are that the D.C. Court is going to rule that net neutrality really shouldn't be there and get rid of it. And if that happens, and net neutrality disappears, the internet as really a bastion for freedom really goes away. It goes away, and then there are a lot of folks who will argue that the internet's not totally free, and it's not. It's not totally free. But if you think that it's bad now, just wait until you have companies that essentially say, if you don't pay us, we're not going to allow people to access. And by the way, for folks who use the internet right now, you actually could have a scenario where, much like cable, where you have bundled packages of cable channels that you get for a certain price, well, for internet service, you could end up with the same thing. Bundled internet sites that you have access to if you pay a certain amount, you pay a little bit more, and you get access to more sites. That absolutely could be created.
So, Ben, would you say then that allows big conglomerates to delist, et cetera? Because essentially this is complete control of the information and kind of a war for who's going to be able to put the information out there. That's this is very big censorship. Do you think that would maybe create then like a Streisand effect?
Well, sure. I mean, consider this. When we talk about cable, for instance, and I think cable is a great example of how there is such a limited voice within that particular medium. And the reason for that is because what many people don't realize about cable is you have about 3 or 4 major cable companies. So Comcast, Time Warner, Cox, who really control the majority of cable distribution in the United States. At the same time, they also create the majority of the channels. So something like, I think it's 60 to 70% of all cable channels are owned by Comcast. Another, 20% are owned by Time Warner. And so if you come along and say, hey, you know what, I'm going to create my own cable channel, and I'm going to put it on cable carriers, you can't just do that. I mean, those companies will simply say, no, we don't have a reason to put you on here. We're not going to put you on. They have the ability to do that. So cable is a very closed system to be able to access. And so you've got guys, for instance, like Glenn Beck, who, he's trying to bring the Blaze to cable. He can't get it on cable.
Right.
Because even though he has an audience and he has lots of money, and he has lots of folks who would support him being on cable, the cable companies say, we have no reason to put you on. And we're certainly not going to put on someone who's competition for us if they own a lot of the cable channels that already exist.
Is that why he tried to buy from Al Gore?
Correct.
At the Disney Network.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's why. Why, by the way, Al Jazeera did buy it, because Current TV as a channel was already on, I think, 75 million homes. That's where it already was. And so the channel itself made no money. It was losing money. It was hemorrhaging money. But the value of it was the fact they were already a cable channel. You buy the channel, and now you're automatically in. Yes, you're exactly right. That's why Glenn Beck was attempting to buy that.
Well, and something really interesting is Glenn Beck, as recent as last week, said that it's very interesting how many of his sponsors are now bailing off because of the fact that they're saying, hey, we don't want to get involved. We don't want to be seen as supporters of this now radical journalist. And do you find that interesting too, that they're starting to really hammer anybody that is questioning this administration?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't think it's really that unusual. Again, here's the situation, is we live in a time when we have such collusion between government, a few major corporations that control media, a few major corporations that control Internet. It's the Google domination of Internet. It's a great example of how you get a few companies, a few social media companies like Facebook and Twitter that really dominate the space. And when you start to create so much collusion between government and business, it's very easy to kind of move industry away from people or information sites that you don't like. And so it's a very difficult place to be. And the less freedom there is for advertisers, for anyone else, the less freedom there will be for the consumer in general.
Well, speaking of this, I mean, Ben, is it amazing the sickening depths to which the Republic has fallen? I mean, you've got, maybe switching gears a little bit, you've got the secret FEMA camps now being expanded nationwide. You've got this military-industrial complex is transforming a once-free nation into a giant prison camp. Cashless society control grid constructed in the name of fighting terrorism, was actually built to enslave the American people. Body scanners, sound cannons, citizen spies, things being built in Utah that are frightening. You've got staged terror and cameras on every street corner. I mean, it just really seems interesting that it's the real precursor to this, hellish plan of the New World Order. You've got an extirpated constitution every other day, and now Obama is out there negotiating this super secret trade agreement that just makes NAFTA on steroids. I mean, when you look at how many places we're being hit here on every side, weigh in on that. Yeah,
I think it's look. There's a lot going on right now that's really unprecedented in terms of, as you're talking about, the surveillance state, the militarization of our police forces across the country. We're seeing that kind of at an unprecedented level, the training, the preparation, all that. What I would prefer to weigh in, if I could, is really to talk about how to deal with some of that, because there are a lot of folks who are very, very concerned about it. What does this ultimately mean? What do we do about it? And what I would submit to you is that these issues are actually easier to deal with than we give them credit for. And the way you deal with them, first of all, is to take a step back and say, I'm not going to attempt to deal with this on a federal level, meaning I'm not going to make this a presidential election issue. We need a president who stands up against surveillance. We need a president who stands up against militarization of police. And instead, I would submit that the majority of the issues that we face in this country right now can be dealt with on a local level. If you would go in, for instance, into your community and say, you know what, we need a city council in our city or a town council that does not support having surveillance cameras on every street corner, and we'll remove them in our city, you could do that much easier than you'll be able to elect this president who's going to come in on a white horse and save the day. If you dislike the militarization of police departments across the country, then you get rid of a police chief who is sending all these grant requests into the feds to get military equipment that the Pentagon's, basically releasing every 2 years because they get a whole new set through contractors and they give this stuff away. You get a sheriff, and I'll make this point. The single most important elected position in this country is the county sheriff. Your county sheriff is the highest ranking law enforcement official in your county. And as such, actually has more authority within your county than even federal law enforcement. So if you have an unconstitutional sheriff, a sheriff who does not believe in constitutional rights, who does not believe in the rights of the individual or the citizen who is their constituent, then you remove that person from office and you get someone elected who is absolutely a believer in the Constitution and in your rights as an American citizen. And if you will do that, remember this, that the sheriff does not have to be law enforcement. That your sheriff, there's no requirement for a sheriff to be law enforcement. It's an elected position. I would say that the liberty movement across America needs to start working on a very strong, concerted level to elect constitutional sheriffs to office.
Excellent. Well,
I think this is very, very important point because, of course, and it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, where you're looking at the federal government all the time for solutions when, in fact, they're the problem. And, therefore, if you bypass them, and I think that is part, of course, of what the Founding Fathers were looking at when they really wanted the largest level of government to be the state government, that had at least some level of sensitivity to the regional needs. And so what you're saying, I think, is even more appropriate down at the municipal level. And Sheila and I have talked about this before, and we've got the same problem in Canada, that if you write a check for your 3 levels of government, which you don't actually do, but if people were to, and I think that's why it's good if you actually write checks for your taxes and you know how much you're spending and who it's going to, but you write 32 to 34% for federal, 18-19% for state or province in Canada, and then 9% for municipal, when in fact who provides you with the most services on a daily basis is the municipal, and that really that taxing pyramid should be upside down. And that's where the power of the federal government isn't just in the legislation, but in grabbing the tax control and the taxing power. So I think this idea of going back to the municipal level is really a true grassroots way of dealing with it.
Yeah, I think that's the only way. If people feel like they don't have any voice, and a lot of people feel like this, this is a way to be empowered. I mean, consider the magnitude of being able to say, for instance, in our community, we're going to elect a sheriff who not only believes in constitutional rights, who not only will no longer conduct unconstitutional random checkpoints, who will actually cut off the county from taking in military equipment for sheriff's departments, or who will stop receiving essentially grant money that's stolen from people in the form of gang and drug seizures, which are happening all over the country too. And it sounds like, oh, why would you do that? I mean, gang members, they don't need drug dealers. We should take their stuff away. And what we're finding now is the abuse of that to the point where you now have police who will go into a home. If they find any trace of drugs at all, suddenly they're confiscating all the personal and private property in the home. And that's not constitutional on any level. And so, we're seeing these incredible abuses. Well, you go out and you get yourself a sheriff and you elect them to office and you say, this is about restoring the strength on the local level. The other thing I want to talk about here, if I may, is even one step beyond that. And we've started this new initiative. A lot of folks are aware of this already, but a number of us in the new media are really pushing this idea of jury nullification. And we have launched this initiative called Just Us, J-U-S-T-U-S, Jury Nullification, and it's an awareness campaign to try to encourage people. Listen, when you get called for jury duty, it is the most powerful vote you have. So stop complaining about how your vote in the elections doesn't count, and you don't vote anymore because it's all just a scam. Here's one place where you have a vote. As an individual, there is no question how your vote is being recognized, read, or tallied because you're the one who's physically voicing it, and you have the ability to go into courtrooms across the country, and according to the U.S. Supreme Court in 1794, you have the authority as an American juror in a grand jury trial and in a criminal trial. You have the ability to stand up and to judge the facts of the case, but also the law itself. And as a juror in the American justice system, people are always ducking out of jury duty, and this is not a campaign of civil disobedience. It's the opposite. We're actually pushing for a campaign of civil obedience, to stand up and say, I'm going to exercise my right as a juror, and if I believe that an individual has committed a victimless crime and should not be going to prison for it, so that prisons can make money and the prison complex system can make money, I don't believe that a person should be spending time in prison just because it raises the number of drug arrests so that local law enforcement can get more grant money in because look at the great job they're doing. We're going to start, if it's a victimless crime, I'm going to find them not guilty. If it's a kid who takes a picture of himself in their underwear and sends it out stupidly and is now being on trial for child pornography trafficking, I'm going to say that's a bad law. And the unintended consequences of the law are not enough for me to put some kid in jail and make them register as a sex offender for the rest of their life. I'm going to nullify it through jury nullification. And so I really want to encourage your listeners, if you are receiving jury summons, get your butt over to your courthouse and get on that jury, because you have immense power that we've been taking for granted for far too long.
Well, Ben, and we see juries nullifying tyranny every day. That's the purest votes left.
It is. It's maybe the one true pure vote left. I'm not sure any other vote is as pure as that one. And again, I mean, it's so effective. Somebody said to me recently, they said, well, but this plan you have for jury nullification, and let me be clear, it's not my plan. I'm just really promoting that idea that much smarter people than I have been promoting. But they said to me, your plan, I don't think you're actually going to get those laws changed by nullifying the law in a courtroom. And I said to them, we don't need to change the laws. Let them pass bad laws. And as a jury, we have the ability to nullify those laws. It may not make a difference in terms of completely shifting the system, but it sure makes a difference in the life of that person who's on trial. It absolutely makes a difference to them.
Absolutely. Did you have something to say, Tim? Oh, well, I think we lost him. So tell people, Ben, where we can go to find more information about this thing that you're really getting behind, because it sounds like a wonderful cause.
So you go to benswann.com/justus, JUSTUS, and there you're going to find an explanation of who we are. You're going to find an explanation of who we are not, because we're not asking people to perjure themselves, to lie to a judge, to manipulate their ways into a jury. We're not asking people to not hear the facts of the case and hear out each individual case. What we're asking is that you use your discretion and your legal right and responsibility to judge the facts of the case and the law itself. And also, we have a lot of information there. Again, BenSwann, SWANN.com/justus. You can also find information there that will explain to you some of the historical precedents of this and historically where it comes from. And again, you can also check out FIJA.org, I believe it is. It's FIJA.org, and they have a lot of great information. They've been doing this a lot longer than I have. I'm just trying to use, whatever voice I have to promote something that I think is absolutely a very, very important movement in the United States.
Ben, I know you have limited time, but has it surprised you to see the dramatic difference in the growth of the liberty movement? I mean, embracing the true liberty is rising, as you call it. I mean, even those with the most virulent case of normalcy bias are looking around, obviously saying something stinks in Denmark. And, I mean, these are really great points you made, but does that surprise you that there has been such a shift in this liberty is rising concept?
It has surprised me to some extent, but I think part of it is this too. Look, one reason I'm very grateful for the president that we have right now and the administration that we have right now is I feel like they have pushed to a much larger level and a much faster rate the crackdown through surveillance, through the crackdown on whistleblowers, through the crackdown on journalists, more so than other presidents would have, either Republican or Democrat, had they been elected. And I think that's a positive thing, because I think at some point the American people have to be challenged with the idea that, look, what's happening in our country right now is really not simply the fault of those who are in power. It's the fault of the American citizen who has not stood up and reclaimed their authority, because you have the constitutional authority over a lot of these issues. And I think that because things have accelerated so much, it is encouraging more and more people to stand up and say, well, let's have a different thought here. What rights do I have? What authority do I have? And I think that, had we seen, for instance, John McCain as president, had we seen even a Mitt Romney for president, some small factors would be different, but the overall trajectory of the country would be dead on. It would be the same direction. None of these major issues would have changed. And so I'm glad in some ways that we're seeing the acceleration of it, because it is waking people up.
Well,
but could we argue? Yeah, sorry.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Sheila. I got cut off there for a while. Thanks for letting me back in. But I think that Ben is absolutely right. But I give credit to the Founding Fathers, because they knew there were going to be people, demagogues, come along and try to usurp power. But they set up a system where in order to do that, they would have to expose their hand very quickly and very early, because they had, and I think Obama knew that. I think that's why he pushed very, very early for his signature piece of legislation, and of course the secrecy with which that was done, the fact that it was prepared well ahead of time and was ready to roll out immediately, and there were enough dupes in the Democratic Party particularly to go along with it. But look, by the 2010 election, Obama was already. People were starting to see that the change he meant was completely different than what he'd implied. So I think the system the Founding Fathers set up forced his hand, and it's working well.
Well, I would agree with that on most levels. The one place I would disagree with you just a little bit is I think the change he talked about is exactly what he's giving us.
I have to agree.
I think the difference is, how most people chose to interpret was different. But I think he was very, very honest about it.
Yeah,
well,
exactly.
if you read any of his, I mean, it's always amazing, Ben, because, I mean, people think sometimes we're the kooks, but these are things coming right out of these people's mouths when you look at any books they write. I mean, they always give you an idea of what they're up to through some of their writings, which is always, of course, very interesting. But to weigh in a little bit about the Founding Fathers, I mean, they expected the Fourth Estate to expose corruption. They were supposed to be ferreting the truth. This Fourth Estate, I mean, you're one of the very few people out there that is a true journalist in the minds and hearts of certainly our listeners and I think people abroad. How do you feel about the fact that, originally it was supposed to be, again, ferreting the truth, but you look at this bought and paid for media, what they're doing. I mean, does that shock you at all? And how do you think we can effectively address this as people?
Well, Tom Woods has a great phrase that he uses, and I steal it from him often. So I do give him credit. So there you go, Tom. Don't hate me for it. But, he has this thing he says where he says the mainstream media for so long were the gatekeepers, and he says, and that hasn't changed. They are still standing at the gate, but the walls have fallen down. And I think that's exactly what's happened through new media, is that folks are just going around them. They're still there, and they're still saying the same things. I think, to the point that was made a few minutes ago, that the founders and framers were brilliant men. And too often, I think we look at them almost as if we are more evolved than they were, that we have this, greater understanding of tyranny than they did, or that somehow they were less civilized and less intuitive. Look, they saw all of this coming, all of it. When Benjamin Franklin, and I believe it was Benjamin Franklin, who said when he was asked, what have you given us there? And he says, a republic, madam, if you can keep it.
If you can keep it.
Yeah. I think the issue here was that they understood the republic was the best form of government, but these folks are probably not going to hold on to it because they understood the nature of man. And the nature of man is ultimately, many times, to be enslaved because you allow some charismatic person to come along who promises you lots of things, turns people against each other, and really works to overcome them. My big issue with the First Amendment is I believe that when we talk about a free press with that, we have fallen into, again, generational thinking that the press is somehow corporate media, and it's not. Freedom of press is about the ability, first of all, the First Amendment is this. It's the freedom of religion. Religion is not an organized thing. It's not an organized belief in God. It is simply one's conviction, one's personal beliefs. Because your religion, according to the founders and framers, did not have to happen in a church. It didn't have to belong to any denomination or any group. So you have your right to conviction. You have your right to speech, which means I don't just have the right to think and believe what I believe. I have the right to say it. And then you have the right to the free press. And the free press is about not just being able to say it, but being able to educate others about it. And I think that's where we've taken the idea of a free press, and you listen to someone like Senator Dianne Feinstein talking about the privilege of the First Amendment and not wanting to extend that to everyone. The founders and framers weren't thinking of some guy with a funny hat with a tag out sticking out of the top that said press on it. They're thinking of themselves as men who were able to essentially use, you want to call it propaganda, freedom of information. They were able to use rhetoric, whatever it was, to build the case for war, and they saw the value in that. So I think it's very important that we realize that the free press in this country, it has nothing to do with mainstream media. It has to do with the ability of the individual to talk and to share information and to really to educate and convince other people of what's going on around them, and that's what the Internet has given us.
Hey, Ben. Ben, this is Tom Acavera. I just have one add-in here. I have an intimate knowledge of the municipal court system because I grew up. My father was a judge. My brother is an active judge now. And, you know, it's something that I haven't really wanted to do to the municipal courts because I have some sympathy for these municipal judges. But there is one fact that just was kind of a light bulb moment. In the municipal court, if you walk in, if 50 people are sitting in court and they do not enter a plea, the court is jammed. They can't do anything. They can't enter a plea on your behalf because it's practicing the law they can't do that. And I've heard of this happen once before in another country. I can't remember what it was, and it caused such a stir that they had to change the law. I have to look up into it, but my father being a judge, I know this for a fact that there have been a couple individuals that have come in front of him, and they refused to enter a plea. It cost, just for those 3 different cases, hours to get it rectified with people standing there. Could you possibly imagine what would happen if everybody showed up into the municipal court, starting at the very lowest levels where people are really, really irate for paying all this money? What do you think would happen if we just didn't enter the pleas and did not submit to their jurisdiction?
Yes, I think it's a great idea. Look, and as you mentioned, this is the very lowest level, right? This is where fines are having to be paid, and I think it's great. I think the more that we can do to start realizing again that we have so much more power than we've been given credit for, and we're not using it. We're sitting back and being run over. And again, I think media has a lot to do with that, and I don't mean news media in this case. I mean people watching shows like Law and Order, programs like that, from which they base their legal understanding, or Judge Judy. I mean, come on. When you watch Judge Mathis or Judge Judy, and that's where you're basing your understanding of the legal system, we're in a sad state.
No. Yeah, you're not kidding.
Incidentally, for just a quote here, Sheila, to support the points that are being made here about going to the municipal level. Thomas Jefferson said, "When all government shall be drawn to Washington as the center of all power, it will render powerless the checks provided of one government on another." And, of course, that's what we're seeing.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, is it possible for us to have you back to weigh in soon, Ben, as things unfold? And I know our listeners want to support you, and we've got this stuff in our information sites, and we've got it in our chat room. And just tell us, wrap it up a couple minutes. Just give our listeners the way that they can get behind you, support you in any. They really do want to tell you that we really do adore you. You're a true beacon for liberty, and it's very impressive that you're really taking that fourth estate one step further in a day when you've got this, lamestream bought and paid for media spinning things. They're the ultimate quintessential spin doctors, and it's amazing what you're not being told on the 6 o'clock news, as I'm sure you can attest to in your background. But, how can people get behind you and support some of the things that you're doing, Ben?
Well, I just encourage folks to go check out benswann.com, and there you're going to find a couple different things. We put up articles on a daily basis about things that are going on around the country. We have something on there. If you click on a tab that says Truth in Media, you can actually watch episodes that we have created through crowdsourcing, and these are episodes dealing with really, I think, big issues that we kind of bring down to a very important level when it comes to personal liberty and freedom. And I would just encourage your listeners to watch those episodes and share them. They're up on YouTube. Use those as a way of waking people up as to what's going on. We have one that we just released today about Ibrahim Tarashev. He's the friend of the bombing suspect who was killed by an FBI agent during an interrogation. And that alone, I mean, where has the media been on that story? It's a major story. You have a guy who's being interrogated and he's shot 7 times to death. So, check those out, watch them, and if you like what you see, if you believe in what you're seeing, we have a way for you to contribute and to help back us and to help keep us creating more episodes. We want to be able to keep doing it, but it only happens with the support of people twofold, the support of people standing with us and the support of people sharing what we have. I mean, you become the media when you share this content, not just ours, but anyone who's out there who's producing this kind of stuff. And then the last thing I would just say to people is this. Look, for a lot of us, there's a process of kind of being awakened to all that's going on. Yeah. Too often, I think we fall into the trap of wanting to wake up everyone around you. So you want to run around and yell, oh, my gosh, here's what's happening. Have you seen this? Have you watched this? Oh, and then this thing's going on. And then look up in the sky, it's a chemtrail. And we get so, fired up about stuff. G. Edward Griffin and I were chatting recently, and one of the things he mentioned, he said, yeah, he's a great guy. And he said, one thing to remember is that too often we back the truck up and we dump the whole load on someone. And he says, don't do that to them. Pick one thing, one simple idea to share with someone to just create a spark. Just create something small that begins to awaken them.
I just have one thing to say about that, Ben, and I shared this with Sheila. I watched Reality Check, and from Reality Check is what brought me out from behind the keyboard and actually got my boots out on the ground out there in Washington, D.C., and I'm giving a speech on the 19th, and there's only one person in modern times that's named in that speech, and you're in that speech, sir. I have to give you commendations for everything you've done. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate that. That's very kind of you. That it really is, but that's really it, right? So you've got to speak to one issue at a time and bring people along and realize that find people who are willing to question things. And there are some folks who just don't want to be awakened, and that's okay.
Yes,
you got to find people who are willing to question things, and then don't ask them to question everything. Just get them to question one thing. And bring them along. Remember that at one time you too were probably asleep. So be gentle with the folks that you're trying to wake up.
Well,
yeah,
Ben,
I agree with you. Yeah. Go ahead.
It's just
I agree.
Everybody,
I just think that you go ahead, Sheila.
Go ahead, Tim. No, you go ahead, Tim.
No, I was going to say that Ben's absolutely right. You can overwhelm people, and by the way, that dump truck approach is used by some lawyers. They'll just get so many things that it is dump truck legality. But if you just open people's minds with one idea. And one of the things that I find when I'm talking about the climate scandal, people come up after and say, you really made me think. And I feel that I've really achieved something with that comment. And I think that doing it a bit at a time, because people, so much information, they just get overload and they turn off from it. So I think your last point is so valid.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And again, it's like you're waking them up from sleep. I mean, how do you want to be awakened? Yep. You want someone yelling in your face or blowing an air horn in your ear, or somebody to rock you a little bit and say, hey, come on now, wake up.
Yep.
Well, I always
Exactly.
wondered if Martin Luther was known for, at the beginning of his speeches, saying, "Listen up, sheeple." I don't know if that would be that effective. But Ben, it's been such a pleasure having you on. I mean, God bless your efforts. We definitely support you, and we'll get behind you 100%. And I know our listeners have asked how they can continue to fund your operation and donate, etc. And again, I hope you come back and join us, and you know, weigh in on what unfolds here, as we see, of course, such pressure on the new media too. It's going to be interesting to see how some of these, the net neutrality and where CISPA, it sounds like they're repackaging that and hammering away at that again. Just it's always amazing how they repackage something and try to push it through again.
Yeah, and that's the thing you have to remember, is that there's a lot of money and a lot of power attached to it, and so you can expect to see it come back over and over and over again with a new face on it. Sometimes it's not even a new face. Sometimes it just keeps coming back.
Well, God bless you, Ben.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for being part of our talk today, and we definitely support you, Ben.
Thanks, guys.
Tonight, I want to thank Ben Swann. Please stay tuned for the Proof Negative Show, and tune into the Weekend Vigilante every Thursday from 3 to 6, 6 to 9 Eastern Standard Time.
The Weekend Vigilante Show with Sheila Zilinsky.
This is a globally orchestrated meltdown to reshape the world into complete totalitarian global governance. Really, the end game here is eco-sinister Luciferian eugenics plan.
Ask yourself, how is it that out-of-control megalomaniac rogues run things? Tyranny, fear-mongering, drones, geopolitical chaos, financial crises, mass censorship,